Tony Wheeler is a man who made fortunes from going on holiday. And at its peak, Lonely Planet was valued at £130 million. That's when Tony sold to the BBC.
I guess we hadn't really totally realised what a political animal the BBC is.
Does it feel like the right decision?
No.
Lonely Planet has been guiding travellers around the globe for the last 50 years.
Yes, so many people asked us, what did you do? Where did you do it? And we thought there's a market opportunity here.
It started with a simple idea, a travel guide for budget backpackers. Today, we'll hear about decisions that built an empire, the sale he now regrets, and how this simple guidebook became a lifeline for millions of travellers.
We sort of thought, okay, Top Gear is the cars thing, Lonely Planet will be the travel thing.
I got mugged 3 times in one night, exactly like the book told me I would.
You sold 75% of the business to the BBC worldwide.
It's like the biggest media company in the world, right?
The two of us were the wrong people to be running it into the future.
Tony, having never met you before, Chris and I, by the way, are massive fans of Lonely Planet, so we're very excited for this. And we have this image in our head of this trodden path, well-travelled, experienced genius of travel. And then today...
It's like a sixth sense. I mean, he's not...
the savant of travel.
Exactly.
And actually,
feels it.
Actually what turns out is this dishevelled guy sweating. He's travelled all across London. He's managed to make a trip from Liverpool Street to Shoreditch, last about 2 hours.
That's pretty accurate.
Every single corner you buggered up, like how to get here. You can travel everywhere in the world except for London, it turns out.
Getting here has been the trip from hell today. I started off by going to the wrong place. I had the address down wrong.
Yeah.
So obviously I get there and they have no idea who you are because you're not there.
Yeah.
And then I foolishly decide, I'll take the tube, that'll be faster, which it generally is.
Yeah.
But today it wasn't. I should have gotten a taxi and let the taxi worry about it. First of all, because the train broke down. I don't think anybody jumped in front of the line. I have had that happen this year.
Yeah.
But somehow the train got stuck. And they're telling you, we'll be moving in a few minutes. And then I get off at Liverpool Street and I just get lost getting from Liverpool Street to here.
It's your own...
Google Maps are just not doing
East
what
London
they
is
should.
jungle too much for him.
Your own real odyssey this morning.
It was, definitely.
Challenges.
It was no fun.
Yeah, this background really, it sort of gives a perfect introduction as to why you're the type of person who's like, I better write a bloody book because I cannot figure out how to get from A to B properly.
Very accurate.
So on that note, we're big Lonely Planet fans.
Yeah.
So this is very exciting for us. But
you've actually got 2 super fans here.
2 super fans. Some people, I imagine, might genuinely not know what Lonely Planet is. That is possible, right? Or they not have used it. So can you just explain what is Lonely Planet and who is it for? And I guess the difference between what it was then and what it is now.
Well, it started, my wife Maureen and I, we set off from London on a trip that ended up taking much longer than we anticipated. Not because
much
we
like
got
today.
lost.
Oh, you went to Liverpool Street, yeah.
No,
it was a tough day.
We went to Kabul in Afghanistan, that was more like it. And we ended up thinking, someone should write a book about the sort of travel we've been doing. And that was a very accurate idea because there were people going to Kabul and Afghanistan, but there weren't any books about it. So we just happened to jump into a market that hadn't yet developed. And it did develop and, wonderful, I think.
Can you take us through the journey of then writing those books? So, as a business, as a career, as a job, like how did it actually
How did it
start?
happen? Well, we ended up, we bought an old car in London. We drove it as far as it would go, which turned out to be Afghanistan. We sold it. We carried on.
Wow.
We ended up eventually in Australia. And then we were going to work there for a year and eventually come back to London. But in that year, so many people asked us, what did you do? Where did you do it? How did it all work? And we thought, well, there's a market opportunity here. Because there just weren't the sort of guidebooks that later on there was Lonely Planet, there was Rough Guides, there was Moon, there was, there were all sorts of opportunities, but those books weren't available at that time. So we did a book about that first trip we'd done, the one driving the old car to Afghanistan.
So the first book was called what?
Across Asia on the Cheap. And that's what it was all about. It was about going all the way across Asia and doing it on the cheap.
Yeah.
I looked that up before. I thought it was such a cool title because you were backpacking. You were.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think the word had really been invented at that time.
Yeah.
And was it called Lonely Planet?
It was called Lonely Planet from the very start. Yeah.
Cool.
And you went to LBS, right? London Business School.
I did,
So it's interesting, right? Because you went on this, how to do it on the cheap, and I go from A to B, and I write about it. But also, I've got a I've got business experience. So probably you had an intention at some point to use your business experience to create a business, and this sort of presents itself?
Yeah, it did. It did present itself. I hadn't realised that was going to be it. I didn't have a clue at all. Now, the first book we did was an accident, but having done one book, and that first book, in a small way, was successful, then we thought, well, let's do another one. And we were going to be heading back from Australia to London. We never actually got back to London, but we set off, and it took us a year to get from Sydney to Singapore, which is, traveling slow.
Yeah.
And of course, at that time, this is 1974, you ask an American, should I go on holiday in Southeast Asia? And they say, holiday? You come back in a wooden box. There's a war going on there. Indonesia had burnt the British embassy down a few years before. Singapore was extraordinarily straight-laced.
Yeah.
It wasn't the sort of region it is now, where everyone's been to Thailand too. So we were sort of, in a way, that was pioneering as well.
Do you remember how successful that first book was? I'm so interested in the genesis of this, which, as we will talk about, went on to become an unbelievably impressive business.
Yeah.
Do you remember how that first book actually performed?
Absolutely. I mean, the first book, we did that across Asia on the cheap. Both of us, Maureen and I, had full-time jobs, so we were doing it in the evenings and weekends. And we did it ourselves. We published it ourselves, and then I took a day off work to sell it. I said, I'm not going to be at work next Thursday. And I spent that day in Sydney going around the bookshops. And amazingly, I showed it to bookshop owners, and they were very helpful. They told me what they liked about it, and they bought copies. And before we knew it, we'd printed 1,500 copies. That was all.
Wow.
And they were gone. Well, they were all gone in a week or two. So we printed another 3,500, and they all went. And then we thought, this is interesting.
Yeah.
So we both quit our jobs, which we were going to do anyway, to set out back to London. And instead of setting out back to London, we set out to discover Southeast Asia.
That's so cool. So just for clarity, you sold 5,000 books, and you used that money essentially to be like, let's do this again and write a new one.
Yeah, I mean, we've been saving up money to travel anyway. So we that whole year we lived in Sydney, we lived on one salary and saved the other. So we had a year's salary saved up to travel with. But instead of traveling, we used it to travel researching a guidebook. And it was, what do they call it? It was definitely shoestring travel, bootstrapping, where one project pays for the next one. And, we bootstrapped our way from one book to another book to a lot of books.
And I suppose for context for the audience, I looked up before 2007, the business was doing something like 80 million a year in revenue. Yeah,
I forget what it was. The money,
context.
It grew a lot.
That's wild.
Was it that much? I can't remember.
Well, I also read that 2007 is when you sold 75% of the business to the BBC.
Yeah, we did. We it did grow and grow, and the first 10 books we did, I wrote 5 of them.
Wow.
I wrote the Across Asia, the Southeast Asia. Then I wrote an Australia book and a New Zealand book and a Papua New Guinea book. And then other people started coming to us with ideas.
Is Maureen like, I'm not going there with you. You do that one on your own.
No, she generally travelled with me. We've travelled together a lot and apart a lot as well. But we started getting other writers, and the list grew, and then we had employees, and the list grew some more.
Yep.
And it was, we did eventually, at the time I left, it had been way over 100 million books.
Wow.
There'd been a lot of books sold. And of course, we weren't only doing.
Sorry, can I just clarify? That must be one of the best-selling books of all time, surely.
No.
100 million?
No, that's all the different books, not just one.
I'm quite aware, yeah. Sorry for downplaying your own achievement here, but that's ridiculous. Because
there's quite a few books that sold over 1 million. I mean, the Southeast Asia Guide was hit him. I mean, the India Guide hit 1 million really quickly.
Really? What's your best-selling book?
Not mine anymore, so I don't really know. I would guess it might be. Actually, do you know, Australia probably is it, because so many gap year travellers go to
I was
Australia.
going to say Southeast Asia, Australia is like gap year.
Yeah, it's gap year
Central.
paradise. That's entry level.
That's
gap
what I
year.
did.
Yeah, well, why not?
Yeah.
I did South America. So,
well, that's good as well. I mean, they all sell a lot, but
I have to tell you a story about how Lonely Planet helped me avoid death. I'm sure of it. Basically, I was in Brazil traveling, and there was a very clear chapter in Lonely Planet that essentially said something about Salvador, saying this is one of the most beautiful places in Brazil. The city's vibrant. It's unbelievable. However, there's a 99% chance you will get mugged. So, this is like the most likely place to get mugged in the whole of Brazil. So just be warned, and you wear a money belt and put your money behind, and all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, Christ, hasn't said that anywhere else in Brazil. And Brazil's been quite intense. Like, in general, I felt like I was going to get mugged every day in Brazil anyway. So this must be pretty bad. Anyway, I went out. I got mugged 3 times in one night in Salvador, exactly like the book told me I would. And each time I had like the right amount of Brazilian reals in my pocket. This basically said, leave like, basically £2 worth in your pocket every single time. When they come over to mug, you just give them that and be like, oh, take all my money, or that kind of thing. Anyway, it happened 3 times in one night. And I was like, if it wasn't for that book and telling me in advance to do, like, this is how to go out in Salvador, I could have got a lot hairier. Anyway, so thank you for
Great
that.
advice. You've saved Dan's life.
Well, a lot of places I've gone, particularly dodgier places, the first thing I read is the what's going to go wrong thing.
Yeah.
And it is amazing how often the local scam, and obviously in Salvador, the local scam is point a knife at you or something.
Yeah, it's a knife or a gun.
Gun, yeah.
We only had a knife, but it is both of those.
Yeah, I've only ever been mugged like that once in my life. And where was it? Bogota in Colombia, which is a bit like Salvador, I guess. So I was not surprised when the guy
my
put
wife
the
and I
knife
in
at me.
Bogota, bit hairy.
Yeah. I've had the odd thing stolen, and generally I think, that's stupid of me. Why did I do that?
I had my entire backpack, including my passport, stolen in Malubala in Australia and the Gold Coast. I think that's how you say it. And very annoying. Had to go to Adelaide or Brisbane, where was the passport office?
Somewhere,
yeah. Anyway, it was in Australia, as you know, is enormous. It was highly inconvenient to have to try. Anyway, but this stuff happens when you go traveling.
Yeah, it does.
And the good news is the next stop was Asia, where the clothes were going to be cheap again. I was like, I just can't buy the clothes in Australia. I'll probably survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over the last decade, Chris and I have started over a dozen businesses. It's not something we're particularly proud of, by the way, but it means we've had a lot of exposure to different business banks. You try one, you're not so happy, try another, you're not so happy. The cycle goes on. By this point, between us, we were laughing, but we tried them all. There was one we actually hadn't, and it's because they're newer, and we weren't really familiar with the fact that they had this option. So we wanted to try that based on our own knowledge and compare it. And I tell you what, it is head and shoulders above, and we are thrilled to be using and partnering with Wise Business.
Basically, Wise Business is the only account you need to get paid, pay employees and suppliers, and manage your business's money in multiple currencies.
Exactly. With Wise, you can do business across the world, pay, get paid, and manage your business's international money with ease.
And look, here's the thing. You actually save money as you grow. No hidden fees, no sneaky markups on exchange rates, and no ongoing subscription costs. It's like finding money in your pocket that you didn't know was there.
But my favorite part, and this is crucial, it's just so damn easy to use. I know, because I'm the one who set it up for this company.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you're lazy. I was never going to get you to do it. But anyway, you can make payments in as little as a few seconds, and it integrates with all your business software.
You can easily withdraw funds from Amazon, Stripe, and more in multiple currencies. And it connects to accounting softwares like Xero and QuickBooks. But Dan, what about security?
Well, as you know, every time you try and log in and take money out of the account without checking with us first, the security is amazing. They've got 2-factor authentication, a 24/7 customer support team, and a fraud team working around the clock to keep Chris off our money. I could go on about all of the amazing features, but seriously, when you're a small company or even just starting one, there's already so much going on that having a payment service that's quick, easy, and, by the way, most importantly, reliable is just an absolute necessity. And for that reason, we use Wise. If you want to get on board, it's simple. Just head to wise.com/business to learn more about how Wise could work for your business.
I just want to take us back to the business for a second. So in reading and researching about it before, you sold 75% of the business to the BBC worldwide in 2007. Can you tell us about that experience going from an entrepreneurial business, with your wife, and you had built the business?
And who approached who?
Actually, the BBC approached us, but we were looking for somebody. And, we talked with a lot of people. There was no shortage of people who would be willing to buy it. There were one or two publishers who sort of said, when you want to sell, just remember, we're here, our hand is up. And it was basically, we'd been, by 2007, been in it for a long time. We'd loved it the whole time. It was a wonderful business to run. And one of the things I really like about it is I regularly bump into people, and they said, "Do you remember I used to work for you?" I said, "No, I don't remember you actually." But I was. It was a time when I was away somewhere else or something. But they'll say, "Well, that was the best job of my life. I really enjoyed it," and that's terrific. When people say that to you, that is really good. And there's a lot I do know and I do remember, and and I do know why they enjoyed it. But it was great. We enjoyed running it the whole time we were running it. But around that time, years leading up to 2007, it was time to move on. Our kids it wasn't going to become a family dynasty. We weren't going to be like Succession and thinking who's going to take it over. Neither of our kids, were keen on running it. And any business, if you're going to be in business, you've got to be totally focused on it. You've got to love doing what you're doing. And I love doing the books. But, the world was moving digital, and although I'm onto internet as much as anybody else, but it's not the passion for me that the books were. So we were the two of us were the wrong people to be running it into the future, and why not go now? So we decided to sell, and we sort of waved the flag around, and various people turned up, and the one that we said yes to in the end was the BBC.
Does it feel like the right decision?
No, it wasn't a bad decision.
Wow.
I guess we hadn't really totally realised what a political animal the BBC is.
It's like the biggest media company in the world, right?
Yeah, it's and they're good people. I've got a lot of time for them, and I've still got I've got contacts at the BBC I'm still friends with and so on. But part of the talk was the BBC, they supposedly survive on the television license, which I pay, even though I never watch television. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But there's also the BBC money-making side, and I think probably Top Gear is the best example of that.
Yeah, it's the international licenses, right?
Yeah, that's licensed all over the world, and the money flows in from it, which then goes to doing the nice everyday things.
Right.
And that was the pitch that was made to us, and we sort of thought, okay, Top Gear is the cars thing, Lonely Planet will be the travel thing. And the sad thing about it, we actually did have a television production company within Lonely Planet at that time. We'd done a bunch of travel programs, and we thought, well, the BBC's going to get behind that, and really, that's going to grow like crazy. And instead, what they say, if we get behind this, people will be saying we're taking the name and commercializing it, and instead of putting their foot down on the accelerator, they put a foot on the brake.
Wow.
And so it didn't go wrong, but it didn't go really right either.
It's so strange because it's almost like they took you out of market to not compete with them and then not do anything about it.
I could really see that working as well at the time.
Totally, I can see it too.
That would have been such a great show.
Yeah.
When you look at things like Planet Earth and, a Blue Planet, like there's such...
And there was, we did do some things...
Massive allure, isn't there?
Yeah, and there were some things we did with them that really worked very well. But it wasn't overall the story that we... And of course, and the other thing, was happening that we hadn't appreciated. This was just the time where suddenly TripAdvisor, started becoming a big thing, and people were looking much more and more towards the digital side of it. So in a way, perhaps we chose the right time to sell out.
Well, we were talking about this, weren't we?
Just talking about this. So 2007, you sell 75% of your stake.
Yeah.
And 2011, you sell the other 25% of your stake for something like 118 million or something.
One of the things that the crazy things about all this is that we, when we sold, we had another partner in the business. And the BBC wanted John Singleton, no relation to anybody around here. And the BBC wanted him out of the picture as soon as they could. It's kind of a colourful character, John. So
You're still friends?
He's still a friend with me. Yeah, he's a great guy. And but a colourful great guy.
I love that.
He is, what's the word they use in Australia? An identity. Anyway, so the initial money, a chunk of that went to John rather than to Maureen and I, to get John out of the picture. And then one of the things we'd, as it turned out, very wisely done, we'd sold it to the BBC in Australian dollars. And at that point, it was the top of the market when we sold, and also the Australian dollar went and the pound went. So it cost the BBC a hell of a lot more money, in Australian dollars when they bought the rest of it. And it wasn't that that they hadn't done something stupid or that we'd done something clever. It was just that the exchange rates had altered dramatically.
But timing wise, you sell 75% of the company in 2007. And the remaining stake you sell for considerably more in 2011. And just to point this out, there's arguably the two greatest times in history for a company like Lonely Planet to get out of the business. 2007, the iPhone comes out. 2011, social media starts to take hold. Those are two potential killers for
Are you a magician?
Business. What is your prediction for what we should do next?
Where do we put our money?
We tell you more about our businesses and you tell us when to sell.
I just have no idea. I mean, it was, in retrospect, it was a very clever time to do
phenomenal.
it. And the fact that, we chose the exchange rates at the right point as well. But, but we were doing lots of... effectively, Lonely Planet started with social media from the very start, because those very first books we did, we had in the back, things will change. Places we recommend will go downhill, new ones will come up.
Of course,
write and tell us about them. And, now if someone would just, click and send you an email or whatever. But then, they sent you a postcard, and we got just stacks of postcards. And the fact that they did take the trouble to do that indicated how much they liked the whole idea. It was a good thing.
Incredible timing as well. I mean, 2020. Hindsight is 2020, but when we were reading about it before, we were like, "This guy is a magician."
One of the funny things, the BBC then sold it, to an American media company who just, again, didn't. The BBC, went up a bit, but didn't go as much as they should have done. The new one just kept it on the level, didn't wreck it, didn't do anything great. And he sold it again to another American media company, a company called Red Ventures. And there was an article about Red Ventures a year or two ago, I think in the New York Times, saying that this is the biggest media company you have never heard of. And they're into all sorts of different media things, including one of the things, and I met the guy who runs this site before I knew anything about Red Ventures, a website called The Points Guy. And this is for
I've heard of
chasing your frequent flyer points. God, I didn't realize what a big deal it is, chasing frequent flyer points. But for some people it is. But the really nice thing about Red Ventures, Rick Elias, the guy who started and still is the CEO, was on the Hudson River US Airways flight. He landed in the Hudson River, got rescued off the wing of the plane, boat taken to shore, gets in a taxi, goes back to the airport, gets on the next flight. I thought, there's someone who travels.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So on travel and how travel is changing, what are your views nowadays of, the change in work, the change in travel, digital nomads, digital influencers, travel influencers? What is your take on the world right now?
I've got no specific. I'm interested in all of it. I went a couple of years ago to a sort of influencers weekend in the States. And
oh man, I'd love to see you there. It'd be so great.
It was, I really enjoyed it. It was something.
Did you turn up late and stressed?
No, I turned up totally relaxed and watched things I knew. Just nothing. I knew nothing about, and I was fascinated by it. So I don't want to be an influencer, but I'm kind of interested that
you are an OG influencer. I mean, back in the day, that was essentially influencing, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I guess it was.
You were you were basically travel blogging.
Yeah, indeed. But I didn't realize it at the time. It was fascinating, and and all that stuff, the digital nomads thing, that's fascinating. The idea of people living in kind of an interesting, and let's face it, people always have. I'm always fascinated by the fact that the greatest regret of my travel life was I was in Afghanistan in '72, and I never went up to Bamiyan to see the Buddhas. And I've got friends who were there I didn't know them at the time, but around the same time I've got their photographs of them. And I have been to Bamiyan when they're 2006, was it? After the Taliban had destroyed them. But it is amazing how many people were in Afghanistan at that time. I'm constantly meeting people. I said, oh yes, I was there. I was there in 69 or 78, just before it all went downhill. One of the ones, I just met him last year in New York. I sort of knew about him for years. A guy called Tom Freston, who was in Afghanistan the same time as us, but he stayed there for about 8 years. Wow. And he set up a making Afghan clothes business called Hindu Kush, and exported his clothes from Kabul in Afghanistan to Europe and the States and everything else. Had quite a nice little business going for quite a while. He had to leave when the Soviets came in, and the whole thing just fell apart. So he had to come back to Europe and think, what do I do now? What did he do now? He started MTV. I mean, I've had 8 years in Afghanistan. This is good experience. What shall I do? MTV. That sounds good. Perfect. Yeah. I met him he's got the house that Andy Warhol used to. Not the studio,
Really?
but the house. He lives in the. It's got a plaque outside. Andy Warhol lived here, whenever to whenever.
That is very cool.
It is very cool.
So, I guess when you do lots of traveling, this is my assumption. There's some gift of the gab. There's some having to talk your way around certain dodgy locations. You especially do it on a budget shoestring as well. I certainly know that's how I got around on a proper shoestring when I was traveling. What did that kind of experience teach you in business? Like, how can you relate that to, for example, like your ballsiest business move that you might have made?
Look, I think, and I said this a couple of minutes ago, in business, you've really got to do something you're passionate about. For a bunch of reasons. I mean, one is, and we didn't make any money for ages, and if we didn't make any money, it went straight back into doing another book. And I really resented paying accountants and lawyers. Because any money I paid them, I think I could use that to do a book. I could send someone out to explore somewhere, and they could come back with a book. Paying, lawyers' fees or accountants' fees, you got to do it, of course, but it didn't make you happy doing it. So you've got to be passionate about what you're doing. And if you're passionate about it, the fact you're not making any money doesn't matter. You're enjoying yourself. You'd rather do that than anything else in the world. And the fact that it's not a money maker is unimportant. But also, if you're passionate about something, people pick up on that. They see, hey, this person really likes doing these travel books. The travel books must be good. I think that's true of just about any business. I always think, I did meet Bill Gates once. I spent 45 minutes with Bill Gates. I've met Sergey Brin and Larry Page as well. But anyway,
do they know who you are? As in,
it was a
are you a
deliberate
Lonely Planet guy, or
the Bill Gates thing was because Microsoft was talking about buying Lonely Planet.
Oh, really cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we talked about it, and and it just. I mean, it was really pre-internet. It was the days when they were doing an encyclopedia on DVDs. Before Wikipedia popped up. So we met him, and I've always said, I don't think that Bill Gates and the two Apple guys started those businesses because they were going to be the richest people in the world. They started the business because they were computer geeks. They loved doing that stuff. That's what really made their day.
So I suppose nowadays you've got entrepreneurship is so much more in favor. Like when you were starting your business and being effectively a then influencer, that was incredibly novel. That wasn't an everyday thing. Whereas now entrepreneurship's all over the place. People are seeing it as a genuine route. So what advice would you give to youngsters now starting businesses, and where do you think people are making the most mistakes?
Oh, I just repeat what I've been saying. Do something that you're passionate about. Don't worry about the money immediately. If it works, the money will come later on. If I look back to mistakes we made, and one of them was we didn't value what we were doing enough. Everything we did for £1.95 could have been £2.95, and later £19.95 instead of £14.95, and it would have made life a lot easier. That extra 50% of the selling price would have definitely made things easier. and you're saying, yeah, you're absolutely right that entrepreneurship is much more of a field of interest these days. And I did go to London Business School, and the idea of being an entrepreneur wasn't so much. You'd left it in those days, and you went into banking or business consultancy or all those things. And London Business School they rather love me because I'm somebody who did something slightly different. That's nice.
I do think that's a great lesson to young entrepreneurs, is that they often pour their heart and soul into businesses and then drastically undercharge for the product they've created because of a fear of not being able to sell it. And I think as you become more experienced, you realize the value you've created. I think.
I think the other side of it is to really enjoy your company, to employ people well, to give the best service. You do need a margin that you can work with.
Totally.
And I think we were, I hope, touch wood, that we were good employers. The people liked working for us, and we did a lot of the good things. I mean, when the business got a bit bigger, we had a gym in the in the office, and we employed a trainer. Yeah, it was a bit ahead of our time.
Totally.
Those sort of things, do count, I think, and people, it's part of the reason they enjoy working with you. But yeah, I think we did undervalue. On the other hand, we did. It's so easy to say afterwards, oh, I should have done this. It's if we all had that vision, we'd know on the Monday morning which horse to bet on Sunday. Which is pointless, because if you knew what to do.
I mean, Tony, you sold your business for £88 million. So I mean, not a bad outcome.
No, it went very well. Glad you had that figure, because I'm
trying to remember. Here's 88 million.
I looked it up before because as someone who's used the product forever, like I was at Lake Atalan, my wife, on Christmas, and we still had the books. I had no idea of how impressive the actual business was, and to build a business of that size, I think is beyond the wildest dreams of so many people. And yet it's a product we absolutely love. So in my mind, it's kind of the perfect business, Dan and I have started over a dozen companies between us. So we know how this goes. You're starting up, you're scaling, ideas are flowing, you're making plans, and you're really getting caught up in the bigger picture. This is when the fine details can find themselves overlooked. I'm talking about security and compliance.
Now, before you roll your eyes and reach for that skip button, hear us out. This isn't your grandpa's boring lecturer on following rules. This is about building trust, and in the digital world, trust is the new currency. Here's the thing. You don't have to go through this nightmare if you use Vanta.
Vanta is like having a compliance guru, a risk management wizard, and a trust-building ninja all rolled into one sleek AI-powered package. They automate the hell out of compliance for SOC 2 and ISO 27001. Say it with me.
ISO 27001.
All jokes aside, I've experienced this myself with my company Lottie. We weren't allowed to pitch one of the biggest companies in the country because we didn't have our ISO 27001 certification in place. And so this is a serious thing.
If only you'd have had Vanta, mate. Vanta doesn't just tick boxes. It builds trust. And in business, trust is everything. That's why Chris couldn't get that deal through. It's the difference between a prospect saying, maybe later, and shut up and take my money. With Vanta, you're not just complying. You're showing the world you've got your stuff together. Over 8,000 companies already use Vanta. Whether you're a scrappy startup or you're scaling, Vanta's got your back.
Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds great, but I bet it costs an arm and a leg. Well, if you head over to vanta.com/secret leaders right now, you'll get $1,000 off. So give Vanta a shot and join the ranks of businesses that are building trust faster than you can say SOC 2 compliance. Trust me, your future self and your stress levels will thank you.
Well, we had a lot of people, and when we left at the end, we had 500 employees.
Wow.
Plus the writers. The writers were all freelance, basically.
Yeah. They were travelers.
They were travelers.
Yeah.
But the people in the offices, there were about 500 of them. So it was a reasonable size. I mean, that's not small.
No, I got a confession for you. I was one of your unofficial writers in Southeast Asia, because in Bangkok, you were able, obviously, to get fake journalist passes. And so the thing at the time was, Not in Southeast Asia, it wasn't so necessary, but I did go to Japan and book a few hotels, being I'm a very serious journalist from the Lonely Planet.
We hate.
By the way, there was a lot of people doing it, and I was just one of them. So I'd like to be
hated
honest.
people like you.
I know. I know.
Would you get a reduction, a free stay?
Yeah, they basically put you in like if they had a spare, it was never a nice room. It was just whatever they had, but it was just like you get in the back over there.
Con
like,
man.
Fine.
Well, you were a con man,
Terrible.
and we really disapproved
Terrible.
of that.
Maybe
I
we'll
hope
make
you
an
do.
episode about con man.
Yeah, 100%. I wasn't proud of it, but at the same time, when am I ever going to get to tell you the truth? So this is my confession.
Too late for me to do anything about it.
Yeah, Tony, I apologise sincerely, but thank you for helping me. Actually, I couldn't afford Japan, obviously, so that was very helpful. You've gone on record for saying that a year of travelling is more valuable to people than 5 years of being in education. And I would agree with that in so many different ways. The question is, how can you frame that in a convincing way to parents, right? My parents really valued travel, and so that's quite lucky in the same way as I value travel. But I think a lot of people would hear that and think that sounds like garbage. So can you make it a more convincing argument than that soundbite?
I've got a paragraph which a Spanish writer wrote about why young people should travel, and she just nails it. Why it's so good for them, and how they learn about the world so much. And I think I have said that that gap here, and does outweigh the last 5 years of school or the next 3 years of college or university or whatever, because it's a learning experience. And you never travel when you're traveling with your parents. If your parents are doing things, when suddenly your parents aren't there anymore, oh God, how do you book a hotel? Oh, visas. My parents did that. It's a different ball game. And I think it's a great education. And let's face it, travel is how we meet each other. It's, how the world gets together. It's an important thing. There's lots wrong with travel, and we all know about Greta Thunberg is telling us we should just stay at home and not go anywhere, and if we go there, we should.
Yeah, no one wants to go travelling with her. Let's be honest.
No, well, I thought, and she's in Switzerland, Sweden. It's damn easy from Sweden. She was lecturing Japanese or Australians.
Yeah.
That option isn't
Stop
there.
being a killjoy, Greta. Some of us like to travel.
Yeah.
Go live your life.
Yeah. No, come on, I approve of her, what she's doing, but. Unfortunately, I'm going to keep on being a terrible person and traveling.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things actually about what you created was my wife and I go backpacking a lot and still do. Now we do it at Christmas every year. Is the fact that if I was traveling without the books, I would just stay in hotels. But because I travel with the books, I end up staying in places that are probably less expensive. But we end up meeting so many people.
Yeah.
And so whether it's New Year's or Christmas or whatever, you have all these travelers that are away, who've decided to be away, who end up being friends.
Yeah.
And so I've met these incredible people over the years that now are all around the world. And it wouldn't have happened without the recommendation to stay in this hotel or this guest room.
Yeah, you meet people. And I'm a great believer, in the fact that travel does take you places and introduce you to it. It may look good on television, it may be great watching the YouTube clip or whatever, but there's no substitute for actually going there and doing it yourself. And I've got so many stories of things that have happened because, I was there. And
there's also something really important about this at the moment. We live in a loneliness epidemic, right?
Yeah.
There's actually, the survey of your average American male in his 30s has an average of 0 close friends that they can call if they have a problem.
Yeah.
0. Horrendous.
Yeah.
You think it's at least 1 or 2. It's not. It's literally 0.
Thank God I have you.
So exactly. Although text me, don't call me.
Yeah.
Leave a voice note. But it's one of those things where if you've gone through that period of your life and you do feel lonely, and obviously Lonely Planet being a beautiful name for this, but if you feel lonely and you feel like you can't connect, let's say you live in London, it is very difficult to be like, well, what do? Go down the pub and make a random friend? No, I can't really do that. And when people come to me with this kind of problem, I actually say, go travelling. That is a place that you can go make friends. For some reason, the social contract is just broken.
Yeah.
Where, okay, this wouldn't be normal for 2 lads in Sydney or ladies in London to just meet up at a bar and become friends. But if you're from different places and you're both in Shanghai,
Yeah.
It's totally normal.
And,
And
you know,
you
there's-
really genuinely become close friends. And you meet someone for a night and you're like, should we travel together for the next 3 months? I mean, that happened to me all the time.
Yeah,
And I'm still
yeah.
friends with those people.
Yeah, and you know, you meet them in Shanghai, and maybe it is, you know, you don't carry on that day, but then 2 or 3 days later, you meet them again. You know,
Yeah. That's also
That
so
happens.
true, right? You're like, oh, you're the person that I met, you know,
Yeah.
what are you doing in Beijing?
Normally,
Yeah.
it's because you're following the Lonely Planet
It's
route.
exactly true. Yeah. Like, you've got the same book.
You're doing the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you know, you need somebody else to fill the car up, or
Totally, yeah, for the
to
travel.
book the trip or whatever. Yeah, I've got it. It works. It
It's
does work.
it's an interesting point because, like I say, if you're following the Lonely Planet route, you're going to a lot of the same places, you see a lot of the same people. So I suppose one of the questions I had before was, how do you sort of square the idea of pushing people to travel and be outside their comfort zones and all the rest of it, and visit new places and new destinations with what is clearly like the Lonely Planet effect, which is,
Yeah.
you know, you recommend a cafe, I go to the cafe, and
Yeah.
so does everyone.
You're a Lonely Planet sort of person. You know, I've seen that in the, you know, the ads. I'm looking for someone else who is a Lonely Planet sort of person.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm too old for this now.
fair enough.
Sort of related to Chris's point, though, there is a lot of over-tourism.
Oh yeah. And
What's your view of your impact on that? Like, genuinely, not to be overly challenging or difficult, right? You've done such an amazing job for people like us to go and discover the world and make it easy.
Yeah.
The downside effect, of course, like, I'm sure the internet cafes of our era and the actual cafes and little restaurants would be so grateful for everything that you did. There are also places that are going to be like, this was better until Lonely Planet wrote about
Yeah,
us.
you're 100% correct. You know, and we look around the world today, and you know, there's the Barcelonas and the Amsterdams saying, you know, don't send us any more tourists. We've got quite enough.
Yeah.
I don't think Venice is, because Venice isn't a town anymore. You know, Venice is just a tourist abstract. It's a sort of a real life medieval amusement park.
Yeah.
But Barcelona and Amsterdam are towns that are overrun. I've just been in Albania, and I've been to Albania twice in my life. 2006, when it was just reopening after the Hoxha years and the pyramid scheme and the collapse of communism and all that stuff. 2006, everybody was scared off from Albania and not wanting, you know, just tiptoeing in the door. Well, now I was there 2 weeks ago, and you know, it's definitely booming a bit.
I went to Tirana last year and it was rammed.
Yeah, it is. You know, it's getting, and it's a lot more now than it was last year. And I'm willing to bet in a couple of years' time, Tirana will be Barcelona or Amsterdam, saying no more tourists. But there's lots of places. One of the ones there's a book just written. I forget the name of the title. Paige McClanahan, I think it was the woman who wrote it. The New Tourist or something. It's an academic sort of study of tourism, and she's looking at those places like Barcelona and Amsterdam that've got too many tourists. And she's American. She also brings up Hawaii, where a lot of Hawaiians say don't send any more mainlanders. We've had enough of them. But then she also looks at Liverpool. You know, in Liverpool, I went to see Boys from the Black Stuff a few weeks ago at the National Theatre, you know, which was set in the Liverpool in the Maggie Thatcher era, when Liverpool was flat on its face, and Maggie Thatcher was someone who put her foot on their head when they were flat on their face. And you know, and Liverpool has really bounced back. And what's it bounced back from? Tourism. You know, they've used the Beatles like crazy, but they've got some great museums. They've got lots of things that really work well. And she definitely says in this book that, you know, here's a place which, you know, has been welcoming to tourism and hasn't been overrun by it, and would even like a few more. And I go to lots of places where, you know, I often, I'll probably find it's wrong now. I look at Ravenna in Italy, a town a bit south of Bologna, a bit north of Rimini. Great town, you know, beautiful place, wonderful churches and mosaics and great Italian food and nice places to sit with a cold beer late in the early evening sort of thing.
Sounds great.
And it not overrun by tourism, I didn't think. I'd go into one of these churches that was nearly 2,000 years old, and I think, where are all the tourists? Why am I not elbowing my way in? So yeah, you know, not everywhere is overrun. And I've done talks where I said, you know, look, here's our guide to Bali and our guide to Vietnam and our guide to, and all these places. People say, oh, that was great till there were too many tourists and Lonely Planet was what did it. We didn't, of course. We didn't build the airport or all the hotels or book all the flights and these things. But look, we also did a guide to Afghanistan, We only ever did one edition of it. We just thought Afghanistan might be reopening.
Not the best selling.
No, it's not the best selling. I was really proud we did it.
I heard that
Yeah.
the Taliban loved it. Yeah.
The
They
military.
visited and they never left.
I've got a few photographs of military using it in there, and it was a great book. And I when I went back to Afghanistan in whatever year it was, 2006, 2007, I took it with me and used it, and it was great. But if someone would say, "Oh, Afghanistan, well, that was okay until Lonely Planet came along," the Russians, the Americans, the Taliban, we could live with that, but Lonely Planet, please no. I'd be really proud of that.
Yeah, we need to play a game which is Taliban or Lonely Planet.
Yeah, if I could say I'd ruined Afghanistan.
So nowadays, like, where are you traveling? Where are the places you're going? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Just all over the place. I do it. Everybody loves Italy. Italy's got so much going for it, and the
just
food's
went to
great.
Italy.
They know how to live in Italy.
Yeah.
And one of the delightful things is that the Italians love Lonely Planet books. I mean, I get better reaction in Italy than I do in a lot of the English-speaking world.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that how you introduce yourself?
Yeah, no, they know about Lonely Planet there, and the Italian people who translate Lonely Planet guides into Italian. They're always saying to me, "Come to Italy." I went to Rome for them this year. I went to Turin for them last year. I go somewhere for them every year, and I'm always, if they say come to Italy again, I always say yeah. Why not? So Italy is a great place to go to again.
Sorry, I'm quite fascinated by this. They invite you to Italy as if you can't go to Italy on your own volition. Who is they?
The EDT, Edizione di Torino. They're the Italian translators,
Right.
And they're putting on. I mean, they do an annual sort of Lonely Planet travel weekend in different cities, and they have a lot of speakers come in, mostly Italians, but a few people like me they have to translate for.
Yeah.
And they have bands. They actually tried to get Van Morrison last year, and they couldn't afford him. They made him an offer, and I said, God, do you have that much money? But it wasn't enough for Van Morrison.
So Italy's your favourite place?
That's one of my favourite places.
Do you have a favourite place?
I often say that the Departure Lounge. It will be Gatwick tomorrow.
How many countries have you visited?
Oh Jesus, a lot. There is.
Do you not know the number? Have you not tried to work it out?
I do know the number, and
we're gonna push you on this,
I know,
Tony. Don't waffle around this one.
Okay, I've got it. I could turn my laptop on and I could look it up.
We're going to make
because there's two things. There's a thing called the Travelers Century Club, and you've got to go to 100 countries to be a member.
You must have done that easy.
Left out in the dust.
Yes. Easy.
Yeah, no
I feel like
trouble.
we've probably done that.
Yeah, that's no trouble.
Yeah.
And I've spoken at the in America and in England a number of times. But then there's lots of people in the Travelers Century Club who've been to every country on Earth, which effectively means all the 193 UN countries. But then, to my mind, Taiwan, they're not in the UN. But Frank Zappa said, "What do you need to be a country? An airline, a beer, and a football team. If you've got those three things, you're definitely a country." So Saudi Arabia isn't a country. They haven't got a beer. No beer. But Taiwan definitely is a country.
Yeah.
The fact they're not in the UN doesn't matter. Oh, Antarctica. It's not a country. It's a whole continent.
Have you been to Antarctica?
Oh, yeah, more than once.
Yeah. How was it?
Fantastic, yeah.
I went to Antarctica for like a day from Argentina. I was living in Argentina, did the whole Ushuaia to Antarctica boat thing.
Yeah.
24-hour experience kind of vibe. Yeah, 'cause, I mean, it's so big. I mean, you were a bit like, all right, I'm in Antarctica now. I've kind of done that. I've ticked it off. But like,
no, everyone.
Where do I go?
People who go
from
to
here?
Antarctica then want to go back, because then they want to go into the other side of Antarctica where the explorers all landed.
Totally.
And they want to go to South Georgia Island, which is truly spectacular. And I went there and I was blown away by it, and would happily go again.
Where's your favourite cold location?
Oh, Antarctica probably.
I think
I went to the Falkland Islands and I really enjoyed the Falkland Islands. Yeah, I thought it was really fascinating.
That's fun. I didn't go there when I was in Argentina. That's silly, isn't it?
Yeah, you should go. It's
What about the Galapagos?
and I've been to Galapagos as well.
Anywhere better than that for tropical island life?
Just before the pandemic, I was in Socotra, which has been defined as the Galapagos of the Indian Ocean, except it's plants rather than animals. And it's really part of Yemen. So if you go to Socotra, you can also say, oh, I've been to Yemen.
Speaking of COVID, got an Australian here who loves to travel. So where were you in lockdowns? Were you locked down in Australia, unfortunately, or somewhere else?
Yes and no, because I was.
Yes, but I broke the rules.
I was in Socotra.
I was in Italy.
Not in Italy, but because Italy was a place where went wrong to
Yeah,
start
you wouldn't
with.
want to be in Italy. Maybe safer in Australia than this one. Yeah.
It was, that whole time was a weird time.
Mm-hmm.
And Australia was one of the weirdest times.
Yeah.
And they haven't confronted it yet at all.
No.
I think, at some point, someone's going to have to confess, well, we really screwed up here. And the Australians did, I think.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the people should be really ashamed. Anyway, I was in Socotra when we had to sort of leave. We were in a tent, and there was a knock on the tent flap at 2 a.m. saying, the weekly flight's going 2 days early. You've got to get out of the country because the world's about to shut down. And I got back from there to Cairo, and I called a travel agent in Australia, and they got me on a flight back to Australia. And I got into Australia the day before they shut everything down.
Oh, wow.
That's lucky.
And then I had to go into
Unlucky,
quarantine.
really.
Well, yeah.
You probably would have
yes and
better
no.
off being in London, maybe.
Well, probably would have been. And then, we were there for a year, and it sort of was open a little bit, and then it was closed, and then just before it got really bad, Maureen and I managed to get out. The only way you could leave was if you were given official permission. And we applied. We said, we've got a place in London and the roof is leaking, which turned out to be true, unfortunately. I didn't realise it was leaking until I got back and had to call Pimlico plumbers. But
Who's currently leaving? I mean, he's trying to get out of the country at the moment.
Yeah.
So just on with your wife, obviously you've done so much travelling and you ran a business together. I'm interested as to what it was like to actually run a business like that with your wife, and that quite full-on experience.
Yeah, it was, and it worked. Overall, it worked really well. But I've got to say, that there were things that we had our own field, and I think later on she took the reins much more than I did, because a lot of the negotiations and so on to sell the business she did rather than me. She was much better at it than I was, despite my going to LBS. But on the other hand, I was the creative side of the business, dreaming up the next guidebook. I love doing the guidebooks. I really got a kick out of it. And a lot of we have an annual sort of meeting in London of really old hand Lonely Planet writers. I don't organise it. One of them who actually, he's written a lot of books, and he actually lives in Phnom Penh. He's married to a Cambodian woman. But his kids, he comes back to England every year. He went to Warwick University, same as me, and he organises it.
Same as me.
We just get you too?
Me as well, yeah.
Oh, and Simon Calder. Warwick.
Popular place.
I know.
Makes some great people.
Maybe you should move to Phnom Penh.
Maybe.
Anyway, we get this little assembly of writers, and we assemble at a local pub and near to me, and I pay for all the beer, and they all swap travel tales, and they've got great
Incredible.
travel tales. I love it, and they clearly do as well.
After decades in the industry, what actually excites you about travel still?
It's always somewhere new. I go somewhere new I'd be disappointed if I didn't sort of add a couple of. You said how many countries you've been to. Well, I haven't been to all of them. I haven't been to all 193. And I've been to quite a few that I would count as countries. Falkland Islands, Taiwan, even Gibraltar, Antarctica, French Polynesia. They've got a beer, Hinano. They've got 2 airlines, Air Tahiti Nui. They've got a currency. They may not have a football team. They probably have got a football team. They've got a very good rowing team. They paddling. They're definitely, a country as far as I'm concerned. They're not just a colony. So yeah, I think I've been to 160 or something of the 193, and I've probably been to about what I would count 30 others that aren't countries.
And how old are you now? Do you mind me asking?
Extremely old. I'm not going to live long enough to go to all of
the
them.
Richter scale. Yeah, that was what I was trying to work out. Do you think you've got time left to visit?
Oh,
all
look,
of them?
anybody who wants to say I've been to every country on earth, and as long as they've got a big enough credit card, and a passport that lets them get the visas, could sit down and.
But you do have those things.
I do.
And you do have enough time left, realistically.
Yeah,
so is that an ambition?
No.
Is it really not?
No, that'd be just sort of like ticking boxes, wouldn't it?
Right. Okay.
I've really got to. There's places I do. I've never been to Algeria. I've never been to Jamaica. Why not?
Why not?
Jamaica. I nearly did. And it was going to a friend who's half Jamaican, and he was getting married, and first of all is the marriage didn't work, and secondly the COVID
Probably
came
because you
along.
didn't go.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So we'd actually booked it though. We were on our way to Jamaica, and then didn't happen. So yeah, there's places I'd like to go to still, but the idea of going to the places just to say, okay, I've been there, doesn't really.
I was going to say, as someone that is so creative, was the creative side of the business, is a traveller, entrepreneur, what's keeping you busy now? What's the things that are really exciting for you day to day?
Well, as I say, traveling, the two countries last year were new ones, were Uruguay and Paraguay. I'd been to most places in South America. I hadn't been to Venezuela still. But I hadn't been to Uruguay and Paraguay. And we were joking about this last night. One of the things I really wanted to do when I was in Uruguay was go to Fray Bentos. Now, does it ring out? It's a very English word.
No.
It was a tinned, in the 50s in particular, there were tinned steak and kidney pies.
Right.
And before I went to Fray Bentos, I went to a Sainsbury's and I went looking for, and there are 2 shelves of Fray Bentos. It still exists.
Wow.
But it was very popular in the 50s. Who eats tinned steak and kidney pie anymore? Some
You.
people. I don't know.
You might
So
call
clearly
that.
some people do, because you can buy them in Sainsbury's.
Wow.
But the town of Fray Bentos is where they invented it.
Really?
And it's like an industrial museum. This old town, which is, was run by the Brits a century ago, and it's an industrial museum, a Victorian era, and it's fascinating. I was really intrigued to see it, and I mean, you're obviously you're too young, but if you were a little bit older, you would know the name Fray Bentos. I might drop into Sainsbury's on my way home this afternoon just to check.
Proud we
So-
don't know.
So yeah, Paraguay and Uruguay. And then
Amazing.
this year I went to 2 countries I'd never been to before, for different reasons. One of them I went to Nigeria, which, it's the population-wise the biggest country in Africa. Gets virtually no tourists at all for good reasons. If you're going to get mugged, it's probably a good place to get mugged. And it's not it's Boko
It's not
Haram.
the top of the list in Africa,
It is
is it?
not top of the list in
No.
Africa. Oh, there's some fascinating place.
Yeah.
Afrobeat music, comes from Lagos, and Nollywood. It's got lots of things to say for itself. But I went there basically with Medicines Sans Frontières.
Oh, right.
I went around some of their hospital projects. I spent 2 weeks with them, staying in their guest houses, which sometimes are. They worry about security because one of them is in the Boko Haram area, and riding around in their Land Cruisers, and I've been involved with one of the things we used to have.
I thought you were about to give us the soundbite of the century, and I've been involved with Boko Haram for years.
involved with staying away from them. We had a foundation in Lonely Planet,
Yeah.
which we called the Lonely Planet Foundation. It started up with the famine in Ethiopia and things. We're making money in these places. Let's put some money back into it. Well, when we sold Lonely Planet, we couldn't say, oh, by the way, you've also bought a charitable foundation. So quite a bit of the money that we got from selling it, we put into pulling that foundation out, and we're still sort of running it.
Amazing.
And I went to various projects that we've been involved with when I was in Africa this year.
This does lead me to my last question, which is, you ran this company for so many years on a shoestring, and the passion's so obvious, and it creates, like, doing that. I mean, I've done it, right? It just creates a certain thriftiness and an enjoyment for the thriftiness, and a real disconnection between the ego and the finer things, and just the enjoyment of the travel and the adventure of it all. It's quite character defining. I think it's probably why you say how important that year is, for especially Western people. It's just so different to what you grow up with, and it gets rid of a lot of your privilege and gives you real perspective.
Yeah.
When you cashed out and you and your wife are really never have to work again, you're millionaires.
No.
You are objectively successful now in society. You have what people would call fuck you money. What did you do? Like, as in, how did you think about what do we do with this money? Do we just put it in, like I say, the foundation, give it to a wealth manager? How do you just strategically go from
All of the above.
Yeah, tell us about it. What did you do? How did you choose to make the investments?
I'm really not interested in watching the stock exchange and so on, but I've got a couple of people who are very good at it and do it for me. And I'm amazed how when you've got money, you seem to just have more money. it does go down because we give quite a lot away every year. And Medicine Sans Frontières is one place that does, and I've got a bunch of other things that we put money into. And and I'm proud of doing it, and I get a kick out of it. It's great to not just put a lot of people donate money to Medicine Sans Frontières. They're a wonderful organisation, but not everybody gets to go and travel with them, which I did, and they were really they were happy to have me travelling with them. And one of the things they said is, we do take journalists and so on, and you wouldn't believe how many of them complain about it's not comfortable enough, and they were pretty confident that I wasn't going to do that. And it's not their places are not always that comfortable, but they were fine. Yeah. I was happy about it. So yeah, we do good things still. We're giving away money, which is nice to do still. But also I've spent money, and as I've said, if it's a choice between the 5-star hotel or the bed bugs, I'm taking the 5-star hotel. Thank you. And
do you invest in startups as well? Do you do any of that kind of stuff?
I've got a couple. Yeah, not in a big way. I'm not. I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I'm not looking for the next big thing, but I've got a couple of smaller things. We bought into a publishing house after we sold Lonely Planet. Does fiction and. Does it do poetry? I don't know if we do poetry or not. Fiction and non-fiction, much smaller than Lonely Planet, and they've had some really successful books. And it's been, it's been fun seeing that side of it. And and all I really do with them is I go to board meetings. 4 times a year? Is it 4 or 6 times a year? I go to their board meetings and advise what I think about things, and hopefully they. The 10 years we've had them, they made money, and then recently they've been losing money, so it hasn't been smooth all the way. I've got the other one that amuses me is I've got a little investment in a company that makes drones.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah, and big drones. I met them first of all because there was a guy I know who was worried about polar bears, and they were filming him swimming in a polar bear outfit, and he was sort of saying, and we could see it was filmed in Melbourne. You could see the cargo ships behind him, and he would say, "This was, this is how it's going to be a polar bear," and it was being filmed by a drone. And I got talking with the guy who was doing the drone filming, and I just really liked what he was doing. It was his own drone, and I just got friendly with them. And before we knew it, I was investing in his company, and the drones they just made bigger and bigger and bigger drones. Cool. So much so that even though they're based in Australia, they've got an office in Hollywood and an office here in London. They've do the drone stuff for James Bond, Pirates of the Caribbean.
So you're also a bloody good investor, like picking your
I don't
bets
think
well
I'm
as well.
One of these people that's so casual.
Oh, I just accidentally came across another $1 billion opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know what I do these days. I just have a charity.
I don't think I'm making much money out of it, but it's fun.
It's cool. Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah. And they know. I was an engineer originally. Right, and every time they build a new drone, they say, "Tony, come around and see our new drone." This one, for filming 3D, it's got to lift 2, 3, however many cameras they need, so it's got to be a big drone.
And talking about flying, do you now fly business and first? Is that a good example of a way to And
I think that's the if you make a bit of money, flying business is the
100%. But I don't know, like
what do they say?
Planet founder, it might be different with this.
Once you get on the plane and turn left, you never turn right again.
What do you do with your kids? What do you do with the kids? Like, will you will all fly business? Because I think it's a really interesting question.
We've spoken about it before. Like, do you give them the business class?
Well, what did someone say? It was Warren Buffett. I gave them enough money that they could do anything they want, sort of thing, but not enough money that they could do nothing. And I hope we've been generous enough with our kids, but no, we didn't take them around.
So are they turning left?
Well, my son has just arrived here. He's just flown in from Australia, and he said, "God, that was an awful flight." My son is 6'2".
Right?
How did that happen? I mean, how did I end up with a son who's bad?
But he was in economy.
He was in economy. Yeah,
oh, it was good parenting right there.
Yeah.
6'2" from Australia in economy.
Yeah,
that is great
tough.
parenting. Well done, Tony. That is good.
So we didn't pay for it for him.
Okay. Tony, it's been a massive pleasure having you tell the story of Lonely Planet. We are, as you know, 2 massive fans. Massively enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us on Secret Leaders.
Thank you very much.
Good fun. Thank you.